As Old as Time, Part 2. Meanwhile, not at the castle. Maurice looked out the window of the automatic carriage with a strange mixture of desperation, revulsion, and regret. Regret, because despite the dire circumstances, he was being carried home by a marvel, a magical thing that figured out the way without eyes or ears and trotted along without a horse. He wished he had more time and the ability to observe it properly, poke at it, tinker with it, see if it obeyed anyone other than the beast. Revulsion, because when he dreamed of a world filled with carriages that could drive themselves and carts without horses, he never imagined such a sickly insectoid thing. The magical conveyance didn't roll. It didn't have wheels at all. Instead, it creeped along on its shafts and axles, making a terrible scurrying noise, like a giant cockroach. In desperation, because he had to go find someone to help him get Belle. Immediately. But who? He didn't really have any close friends, and he suspected that Monsieur Levi probably wouldn't be up to a raid on a magical castle. The man was easily 20 years older than Maurice himself. Who was young and strong enough to help? Who could round up a posse of helpers to go after the beast? And then it hit him. There was only one person, really, and it should have been obvious. As soon as the carriage turned onto the main square, Maurice started to pull out the door. He needn't have tried so hard. It was unlocked and swung open easily, causing him to tumble out into the wet, cold stones. The carriage thing screeched to a halt. Goodbye, thank you," Maurice called distractedly. He wasn't sure what the etiquette was with a thing like that, but it never hurt to be polite. The carriage executed a strange four-legged curtsy or bow, just the way he imagined elephants in the Far East did to let people up and down their enormous backs. Then it scuttled off in its nauseating fashion. Snow was falling, Maurice suddenly realized. He had been so preoccupied with everything on his trip back he hadn't even noticed. Running carefully on the slick cobblestones, he made it for the pub. It seemed as if the usual crowd had been drinking here for a while that night already. The sounds of laughter and singing spilled out into the otherwise silent town. The wind caught the door as Maurice threw it open, slamming it wildly and theatrically. It wasn't what he intended, but the resulting effect was useful. Everyone stopped what they were doing and turned to stare. "Help, everybody, I need your help." "Maurice?" the old barmaid asked, concerned. "He took her and locked her in a dungeon." Damn his inability to speak clearly. Communication had never been one of his inventor's strengths, and it was definitely a liability now. "Who?" That was LeFou, Gaston's little friend. He wasn't a bad sort if you could get him away from the hunter. Not that bright, but fiercely loyal and game for just about anything. Exactly the sort of man you would want along on a beast-hunting expedition. "Belle, we have to go, not a minute to lose." He grabbed LeFou's hand and spun to leave, wildly checking the rack of guns and firearms and other weapons that were kept by the door. They would need to be heavily armed. "Whoa, slow down, Maurice. Who's got Belle locked in a dungeon?" Suddenly, Gaston was between him and LeFou. For a big man, he moved surprisingly quickly. Even in Maurice's addled state, he noticed that there were odd patches of mud that had been carefully brushed off, but not entirely removed from. The man's inappropriately fancy pants. Was he hunting in formal gear when he fell into a pig wallow? A mystery for another time. A beast, a terrible, horrible beast. Maurice made his arms go as wide as they could. Gaston raised his eyebrows at the patrons at the bar, who had all turned around to listen. "Is it a big beast?" one of them asked. "Huge," Maurice said, shuddering. "But did it have sharp, cruel fangs?" another asked. "Yes, but it spoke like a man and walked on 2 feet." "What about a long, ugly snout?" a third asked. Yes, Maurice said, exasperated. Who cared what the beast looked like in detail? It was dangerous and had his Belle. "Will you help me?" "Of course," Gaston said politely. He gestured with his chin to the barflies. "We'll help you out." "Oh, thank you," Maurice said with a sigh. The inventor turned back to the door. The village was a touch-and-go place, filled with people of questionable morality, but when push came to shove, his neighbors really did. Suddenly he found his arms under his shoulders and his feet dangling off the floor. "We'll help you out," someone cried. The door was thrown open in front of him. Maurice was pitched out into the black cold. "No!" he shrieked, spinning around immediately. But the door slammed in his face. He hit it again and again as hard as he could with his fists. "No, I saw it, he screamed. Will no one listen? Gaston stuck his head out the window to take one last look before shutting it. Crazy old Maurice. I'm not crazy, Maurice shrieked. Will someone help me? But the town was dead. Everyone inside with their families or loved ones, doors and windows barred tight. I'll just have to go rescue her myself, Belle's father said quietly, once the reality of the situation sank in. He was a dreamer. It was true, but no inventor lasted long in his or her career by giving into dreaming. The moment something didn't work, either due to a misunderstanding of how a metal behaved or how steam would push a certain way, you had to immediately stop and think and figure out what the cause of the problem was and start again from there. Practical, pragmatic, dogged. These were all the adjectives used to describe successful inventors. Maurice turned around in the cold night and headed steadily for home. He wished, however, that his wife were here to help. She was, he vaguely recalled, extremely useful and handy at times like these, even if he couldn't exactly remember how.